to run our cities, how we're going to run it better. So what I'll do is I'll introduce our 3 presentations, four presenters, one by one, and then we'll sit there after. That's the thing. Okay, you don't want to spark there while someone's presenting. They'll each have about 20 minutes to present, and then we'll have about 30 minutes of Q&A. So our first set of presenters are Mike Frumin and Candace Brakewood. Where is Candace? There you are. Okay. So I'll introduce Mike first. He's the Systems Engineering Manager for MTA's Bus Customer Information Systems, or MTA Bus Time. And he leads the technical portion of MTA's effort to develop real-time bus tracking systems. They will start tracking a fleet of 6,000 buses and serving over 2.5 million riders in the New York City area. He's from MIT. We'll forgive him that. Apparently a lot of MIT in the band, 2 MIT and someone from, okay. Before he went to MIT for his master's degree, he was a software developer and researcher at an open source R&D lab, and also worked for a hedge fund. And so we wonder what the attraction was from not making money and going to software. And led a number of internet startups. And so he's taking that startup mentality into nearly 100-year-old organization in the MTA. A consistent thread throughout his work has been open licensed or otherwise online publicly accessible data streams and the use and development of open source software. He lives in Brooklyn, New York, and very close to where he grew up, so he's a Brooklynite. And attended public schools in New York City and studied computer science in Stanford. He'll be presenting with Candace, and she's a doctoral student also at MIT, where she studies the use of new information and communication technologies to improve public transportation systems. I think that's so important given that much of the dialogue not just in the US, but around the world, around transportation is about traffic, because the elite drive cars. And so the biggest problem they see is how many cars there are in the road, not about how many people you're actually moving through a city to get somewhere. She used to work for the USPTO, handling patents, and she has a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Johns Hopkins. So let me bring the two of them up here for the first presentation.
What did we do? Someone's doing something. So, hi everyone. Benjamin, thank you. That's spooky. So today we're going to talk about MTA Bus Time, which is MTA's real-time bus tracking and customer information program. Our talk today will be primarily focused on the one route demonstration pilot we've done on the B63 in Brooklyn, which you can see on this map here. I'll basically talk about sort of what bus time is and how the MTA is doing it, and Candace will talk about the customer research and behavioral responses of bus riders. So hopefully this should appeal to both the practitioners and the researchers in the room. So, well, one quick correction, man. I didn't lead startups. I just worked at some. So, so I'll start. I think we'll try and tell this as a little bit of a story. Our now ex-CEO at the MTA, Jay Walder, came to New York in late 2009 with a vision for using technology and customer information to improve transit riders' experience. There was already a project underway to do countdown clocks in subways. I'm sure everyone has seen the result. Of course, a focus on this from the CEO doesn't hurt in terms of helping it get done more quickly. And there already had been a successful pilot on 34th Street of a real-time bus tracking and customer information system, but the way that pilot was done, and we'll talk a little bit about it later, the sort of cost estimates for that were sort of way beyond what MTA was going to be able to afford in the constrained circumstances that we face. So, you know, we really wanted to start an effort on the bus side to do customer information on buses, and that's sort of what leads to what we'll talk about today. To motivate the discussion, I think we'll just do a little quick calculation. So, historically, research kind of shows, planning and economic research shows that people perceive waiting time for a bus or a train as about twice what it actually is. So if you're waiting for a bus for 5 minutes looking down the street, it feels like 10. But more recent research shows that in the presence of real-time information, either on your phone or on a sign or otherwise, you're sort of feeling in parity. So if it took 5 minutes, it actually feels like 5 minutes. So with 2.5 million daily bus riders, and let's say an average waiting time of 5 minutes, simply providing the information to people can make people feel like we've captured a collective 3 million minutes a day or 20 million hours per year. And that's really assuming that people don't actually do anything more productive with their time. They just stand there waiting for the bus, watching their phone. And so I think this presents kind of a lower bound, a conservative baseline is in terms of the benefits of this kind of technology. So the question was how to create this information and get it into the hands of riders quickly and cost effectively. MTA has 6,000 buses and about 15,000 bus stops.
Wow, Mike, that's a lot of bus stops. Imagine if the MTA were to install countdown clocks at every bus stop in New York City. The infrastructure and maintenance costs would likely be extremely high, and it would probably take years to roll out. So the strategy for bus time was different. It focused instead on using the technologies that people already have at home or in their pockets, the internet, smartphones, cell phones. But a critical question, and this hinges on the assumption that transit riders, who are historically a very diverse group, actually have access and use these technologies. So one of the questions that I've been working with the MTA, as well as my colleague Francisca Rojas from Harvard, is to help understand levels of technology adoption amongst transit riders. So as you can see from this result from the B63, the pilot bus route for bus time, approximately 83% of riders have recently used smartphones, cell phone, text messaging, or the internet. Critically, this survey showed that the results did not vary meaningfully. The technology adoption results did not vary between income groups or ethnicity. And other customer research has shown throughout the city demographic that are similar in terms of technology use and patterns.
So, excuse me. So with a sort of clear goal in mind, right, creating this real-time information and getting it into the phones and computers of riders, how do we proceed to start the project? I'm just going to leave this slide up and you can kind of ponder it while I talk. In this context, I think I'll gloss over a lot of the technical and contracting kind of details which turn out to be really important to deliver a big project in the public sector. But basically, in early 2010, the CEO and the COO articulated a vision on the delivery of what now is called MTA bus time, and expressed some sort of fundamental change, a desire to make some fundamental change on several levels in terms of MTA's approach to delivering a technology project such as this. So the sort of four real variables were scope. Let's not worry about having the system do everything. Let's just focus on one key goal, real-time information for customers. Technology architecture. Don't make what's on the bus, sort of on this side, the simplest possible thing, and put everything that's complicated on the computers and the servers in the back end. Procurement and contracting strategy, use open standards, open interfaces, so that you can have multiple vendors. For example, one company doing the server stuff, another company doing what's on the bus, or multiple companies doing what's on the bus. Using off-the-shelf hardware, nothing custom, just things that are commercially available. And also, don't give contractors risks they shouldn't have. Don't create problems for them. The problems that you should really be managing, manage those yourself. And finally, sort of ownership and capacity. The project team has to own this project. If it doesn't succeed, it's not because the contractor screwed up, it's because we screwed up. It's our job to make sure the contractor succeeds and is able to do theirs. And so, the objectives behind this kind of strategy for doing a project were, of course, lower capital costs, make it cheap now. Lower life cycle costs, make it cheap later, in terms of how you maintain it, how you replace and refresh the system. And accelerate the passenger benefits, get it done yesterday. And so at that time, when we were starting this project, there was already a pilot project underway that was sponsored by MasterCard. I don't know if anyone saw it or read about it or used it, to prove on limited portions of the MTA, New Jersey Transit, and PATH networks that an online networked, sort of fully featured fare collection system is possible using contactless bank cards and credit cards that people already have in their pocket or will more so in the future. So we recognized an opportunity to leverage this sort of existing and to be installed fare payment infrastructure to share the capital investment for the hardware on the bus. So what you sort of see is basically, these are the things that would be part of a fare payment system. To do bus time, well, all we really needed to add was a fancy GPS device and a little software here to send data to the bus time server rather than just sending fare payment transactions to a transaction server. And it does that every 30 seconds. So we sort of worked with Verifone, who was MasterCard's supplier for that, to do this pilot on the B63 and prove this idea. We also contracted with a local open source software development shop called OpenPlans. I think they're also the ones that did the bike share suggestion website, to develop the back-end side of bus time based on an existing open source project in Seattle called One Bus Away. So before talking about the customer responses, because that'll feed into what Candace will continue on, just think about this in terms of the benefits for the MTA in terms of how we deliver this. We did most of the integration and testing and debugging ourselves, so now suddenly we know a lot about what it means to make a real-time bus tracking system as compared to if we have one contractor and they just sort of handle everything. Neither of these companies were players in this industry before, so now there's two new companies competing for this business. The back end is open source, so the vendor doesn't own the code, we don't own the code, other vendors can work on it for us. We have a lot of flexibility there. And the total price of this hardware setup, and that includes the equipment that's would be shared with a fare payment system, is about $2,500 to $3,000 a bus to buy the equipment. And since it uses off-the-shelf components, you can just do it quickly and easily and cheaply, and it's easy to sort of maintain and replace those things into the future. Compared to a typical approach, where one contractor would sort of control everything, we don't have a lot of visibility or control. There's typically a lot of complicated things on the bus, all the schedules and everything like that, and that's difficult to manage. And the cost for something like that, it tends to border on $20,000 to $30,000 a bus to buy the hardware. So a pretty drastic difference in terms of how the project ends up and how much it costs. Oh, sorry, the customer part, sorry, I had rearranged my notes. So what was the result, right? I mean, functionally you see here, something you can get on a computer, something you can get on a smartphone, something you can get via SMS. Some quotes from some customers. The new mobile website is fabulous. I use it all the time and have been blabbing about it to everyone I meet at the bus stop, on the bus, and in my neighborhood. It has changed my life. This is the best thing in years from the MTA. Your system has already saved me so much time. It has made my family's life easier as a result. I find the info to be very accurate at all times. I know that it's not. It's not perfect. I take the B63 and I find bus time to be astonishingly wonderful. And this is the MTA we're talking about. We've had about, the B63 has about 12,000 daily riders. Currently we're seeing about 1,500 requests per day on an average day for bus time information for that route across all the sort of interfaces. Over the life of the pilot, now about 9 months, I think we've had over 28,000 visitors, users to the mobile and website who have used the system more than once, right? Who weren't just sort of checking it out casually. And we've had over 200 independent app developers sign up for access to the developer API. And this is just for one bus route. You're not going to sell, millions of dollars worth of iPhone apps to a single route. So.
Which one? Thank you. So we know people are using bus time, and anecdotally, it appears that, well, they love bus time. And Mike made the title for this slide, I will say that. So what we wanted to understand was how people are benefiting from this. Why are they using it so often, and how may it be affecting their behavior? Some of the interesting findings we had going out there this summer to survey riders, over 600 riders along the B63, were that regular bus time users consistently report using their wait time more productively. They are going shopping, running errands, doing other activities, and really managing their time with more discretion. Hopefully this will have a positive result for local businesses and retailers along the route as well. Another thing that we're finding is that bus time users also report shorter wait times. So both when they're asked how long they waited on the day when we are actually surveying and how long they usually wait on an average day. Well, we're still investigating exactly how much of this decreased wait time is a function of bus time and how much maybe the fact that they're boarding slightly more frequent services. So additional research is required, but all signs point to some serious customer benefits and very positive results thus far. Another great thing about bus time being web-based is that the system itself tells us a lot about how people are actually using it. So this GIS graphic is overlaid with data from Google Analytics showing stop queries. So when you type in the stop number you're requesting real-time information for. And this is from a period of mid-July to mid-August. And as you can see, quite high levels on the north end of the route. Also, as indicated by the orange and yellow bubbles, there are very high levels of usage near key transfer points. So on the north, near the Hoyt Street, where there's 2 subway stations, near Atlantic Terminal, where the subway comes in, as well as Long Island Railroad, and in the southern end of the route, near 77th Street and 86th Street, where there are subway stops for the R line. So indicating that riders may be using this when making a decision if they want to transfer between one mode and another, or also if they're deciding between taking, let's say, the subway or the bus. So thus far, some really interesting findings, and we're excited to look as bus time rolls out. So what's next, Mike?
Yeah, so right now we're in the process of, through a new set of kind of proper production-oriented kind of contracts and procurements, rolling this out to all of Staten Island by the end of the year. And with very similar hardware on the bus, the same philosophy, and in fact, the software that's powering the back end will be a continued expansion of this open source package, so we control it, other vendors can use it, other agencies can use it, et cetera. And beyond that, you know, the sort of world is our oyster. I think we're going to try and get this project done as quickly as we possibly can, and it's just sort of a function of, well, yeah, of how fast we can do it. So hopefully, between support from folks like you, support from the riders, support from all of our constituencies, we can continue to kind of blow this thing up and just completely change the way people use the bus in New York City. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mike and Candace. And you have 5 minutes to spare, so we'll have more time for Q&A. Candace, I think, is the happiest PhD student I've ever met. So she must really love her research. So this is really exciting. So from a large transportation agency, if not one of the, I think they're the largest in the U.S., right? To a startup. Let's talk to, our next presenter is Diane Eisnor. Am I saying that right, Diane? Yes. Diane Eisnor. She runs U.S. operations for a startup or a live mapping of crowdsourced navigation in real-time traffic called Waze, W-A-Z-E. Diane is also the founder and chairman of Platiel and founded Eisnor Interactive, which was brought by Omnicom some time back. She's a neo-geography pioneer and a serial entrepreneur. So there's an addiction to starting things up and getting them sold, maybe. And she's doing all she can to to increase the world's citizen mappers. And I think that's one of the interesting things that's happening with real-time maps and real-time map data, where you can walk around, pull up your smartphone, and figure out where you are. There's a geographic or map literacy that's developing among the citizenry, and because it's interactive, we can actually respond to and put data on the map. That's my short commentary of it. Diane, we'll work you up.
While they're bringing up the presentation, I guess I'll just introduce Waze and myself. I started Spatial several years ago, and it was pre-iPhone, pre-smartphones in everybody's pocket. And it was one of the early services that allowed people to create maps of things that were important to them. So it was 20 million people that were mapping protests and local food, architecture, But it was a very difficult thing to do, and it was tough to get information at scale because people had to actively contribute information. And that was a real barrier to crowdsourcing. Thank you. Until now. So I'm coming at this from a very different perspective than I think a lot of the folks here, definitely not coming from the governmental side, but hopefully we're creating something that's going to provide a tremendous amount of value to citizens, to government agencies, as we collect more information that's shared openly and in two ways. So we started the company to try to help people figure out what route do I take right now. And when you have real-time information, you know that the route you take now is different than the route you might want to take 10 minutes ago or 10 minutes into the future. So how do you get all of this real-time information and help people get most efficiently from point A to point B? And we deal with drivers, we deal with commuters. So the impact of that is not just congestion avoidance, but reduced cost on fuel and reduced emissions of CO2 into the air. So as Socrates says, it's the journey, not the destination. So we're really putting a lot less emphasis on what we call points of interest or on specific places and a lot more on the route. So this is essentially what Waze looks like. It's a very optimistic application. It's available for free on all the smartphone platforms. And what you're seeing here, those little creatures are Wazers. Those are people using the service right now near you. And you can choose to be anonymous or not, but all you have to do is turn the application on while you drive, and we're collecting the real-time information that we convert in real time into traffic information that's used. By now, 2 days ago, we crossed 8 million drivers. And our average driver is driving 300 minutes a month with the application open. So while we provide free voice-guided turn-by-turn navigation and real-time traffic, people are not using it when they don't want to get lost. They're using it when they're commuting to work or when they're stuck and they want to figure out a route around the stuckness. The traffic lines that you see up there are created also from the users using the service, so it's primarily crowdsourced. We do bring in some information from Clear Channel service, which is called Total Traffic Network, and we tap into the Twitter Geo Firehose and use our own algorithms to convert geolocated tweets into traffic information. And then the bubbles with the cars on it are manual reports. So while most people are just turning it on and driving, if you're actually stopped, you can report on accidents, hazards, this kind of information. So there's a lot of information sharing. Being able to look at alternate routes. We look at alternate routes in a number of ways. The traditional ways, which are obviously cross-time information, but also your preferred route. We get to know your preferred routes over time and start to customize based on the way that you drive in your preferred routes. And right up front, you can see what's happening along the way. And if anything changes along your route, we will try to reroute you. That's the report screen. The other thing, so it's important, I guess, to know that the information we collect from the map to the traffic to the community at the core is all our own information. We don't use NavTech, we don't use Google. Everything has been contributed by the crowd from available information. In the US, we use Tiger data from the Census Bureau. But that's a static map that doesn't have turn restrictions. It's not navigable. And so just from the GPS traces and processing that and then having some of our users go online to a web interface to make some corrections, we're able to have very, very good navigable maps in most of the world. Related to how you get where you want to go, in the mapping and kind of location business, we've been trying to aggregate lots of sources. And what happens when you want to find a destination is that you end up with a million Starbucks finding applications because everything kind of bubbles to the most banal. So what we decided to do was to incorporate, while you're trying to navigate, when you put your destination, it automatically launches whatever we have available. So it could be Bing or Google, but it can also be Foursquare and Yelp results. So when you're looking for a specific restaurant, you're the one who knows if you want to know how many stars it has or how many people are checked in, or if you just want the basic information. So we're really trying to look at this entire location stack created primarily through GPS traces and use that as a way to get people where they need to be as quickly as possible. You'll notice, again with the optimism, we have, this was for Halloween, pumpkins and ghosts on the road. And we place what we call road goodies in areas where we don't have fresh information. And what we found is that we can influence driver behavior to a certain degree by giving people points for driving over these road goodies. And so one person drives over them, and then everyone else in the community benefits in real time from knowing what the speed is at that point in time. It's also social in a number of other ways. There's group functionality. So, for example, Palo Alto to San Francisco, it's primarily used for commute groups, sharing information just along your route, only the information you want to have access to. But interestingly, it's being used for groups of traffic spotters, for TV stations. It's being used, for example, by firefighters. It's being used by motorway. All kinds of groups are beginning to form. You can also check into Foursquare when you get to your destination. So that's all fun, right? And when you deal with trying to collect a tremendous amount of crowdsourced information, you need it to be fun and engaging because you need people to give you a lot of information. But that's not the end game. The end game is how do you turn fun into function? How do you create something that's truly valuable for millions of people? And this is, I was in LA on June 1st, and LA is our #1 metro in the US in terms of density of drivers. And I was going at 5:09 from the airport to the Lux Hotel. And I did a little experiment. This is the route that Waze gave me, and this is what I saw out the window. I should note that Google Maps told me it would take 108 minutes to get there. Now, you'll see that Waze tells me to get off the highway, which if you're a commuter, that can be disconcerting. You're used to the way that you're driving, and the change can be scary, but I followed it because I work there. So I got off into Sepulveda, and this is what I saw. Pretty clear streets. And it was clear basically all the way to my destination, and I got there in 26 minutes. So that's just an out-the-window test, but this is what we're trying to achieve. Then we did this. I'm going to try to jiggle the cord. I'll just hold it here while you're watching the video. I don't know if you've heard of Carmageddon. 405 that was closed in July. Normally carries 500,000 vehicles. And you put together this little video basically showing how much strength it has. Every major time we have
Bugged by the 405
But it's
shutdown.
true.
Waze has
There
partnered
were
with an
no
LA
sensors
TV station,
in the roads
and
or
it hopes to
cameras
show
that covered all
thousands of
15
potential
alternate routes
users
that you could have
how the
used during
app
that
can
period
make
of
moving
time.
around Carmageddon easier.
So ABC got in touch with us and asked us
The
to be
publicity
their
is putting
traffic
Waze
solution.
itself on the map in a city known for its terrible traffic. Dan Simon, CNN, San Francisco.
App that can find you the fastest routes around the gridlock. It's called Waze, and all weekend long we'll be getting real-time updates on the delayed routes from the creative team behind it. Waze combines navigation technology, networking.
Okay, well, you get the idea. The idea is that ABC used us during that period of time because it was the only way to get the real-time information. Then the mayor began tweeting us, and the various agencies recommended using Waze in addition to their other sources. And it was a tremendous, basically promotional opportunity for us. We doubled our driver base in LA over that period. I was a traffic reporter during Carmageddon weekend, getting up at 4 a.m. and even getting makeup, which I don't normally get to do. So what's interesting is that even after Carmageddon, they continue to use us. Their traffic reporters now have an iPad that just projects onto their green screen, and they're doing citizen traffic reporting every morning. And it's interesting because it's not just a way to get information that's happening on the surface streets, but also audience engagement, really engaging with the citizens to try to figure out what's going on the roads with photos, with information. We even had the helicopter pilots were finding things on Waze and then flying over it to go film it because they had this new report system that they didn't have prior. We even have, in the UK, there's a situation where one of the gentlemen who works for the motorway on the highways basically says that he gets his reports on Waze before they come into his control room. And at one point, he got a Waze report 10 minutes earlier of a near fatal accident. And because he was there 10 minutes in advance, he believes that that Waze actually saved that person's life. That wasn't the intent, but if we can do things like that, that's also helpful. That's Alicia. Okay, sound is going to be an issue, but then we rolled it out in Dallas, the same thing, and we'll be rolling out in about 20 other markets in the next 3 to 4 months with this citizen traffic program. And it's just a very, very simple, easy way to provide people who don't have access to a smartphone access to that information. So that joint partnership between mobile and broadcast is incredibly powerful. We've also started working with a number of the connected car companies. It's very exciting to me to be able to have access to the APIs in cars. So not just simple things like being able to understand when you're running out of gas, but also tapping into the cameras and understanding what lane I'm in. Is this an HOV lane or is it not an HOV lane? And that will help us understand the speeds better. To know if the windshield wipers are going, and that can give us an indicator of weather as it relates to speed. One thing that's incredibly interesting is that with all of this real-time data we're gathering, we're starting to get new insights and understanding the patterns of driving. Very simple signals for understanding, is this person parallel parking? What kind of lane change is this? Is this a stoplight or is it a stop sign? So just from studying GPS traces, we can start to understand this driver behavior in new ways. I guess I'll show this. Let me try again to hold. Like Rome, there's so much information that we're collecting that we're basically, Wazers are driving cities in about 24 hours. This is Paris. And those things that look like flashing buildings are the manual reports, and everything else is just passive. This is Tel Aviv. Oh. Anyway, the music would be going really crazy right now. In Tel Aviv, we have, well, in Israel in general, 20% of the entire population uses our application. And there's nothing that happens in that city without us knowing about it. That's where we aspire to get in the rest of the world, and it seems like we're growing at a fast enough clip and working with some amazing people to help make sure that that continues to happen. Let's see. In terms of what we do with that beyond the business, why we think it's important, it's really this idea that when you look at places, right? Maps used to be really a compilation of places. We used to think about places as something that we could own, a place that we stopped through. Now I really see that we each have our own patterns, the way that we move through the city, and that becomes something incredibly interesting when you think about ownership of place, for example. And that it's not really that we need to go out and own places, but we become a series of the traces that we leave behind. And I think that that's our unique identifier, and that these new technologies are going to make a big impact on how we move through the city and at what speed and at what time, and this rapid decision making about how and where I need to be and where I should be, hopefully will make our lives much more efficient and help us spend time doing the things we want to do. That's it.
Thank you so much, Diane. And that was fancy music. Okay, let me get a little organized here. Again, 5 minutes off our 20-minute presentation, so we're doing pretty good. Good clip. Is Rachel here?
Yeah.
There you are. Sorry, I was sitting right next to you. Not paying attention. So, from startup but very global, before that, the largest transit agency, to now the point of view of a city and running a city, which is systems of systems. I'm reminded of a story that Stuart Brand likes to say. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but he has, from a number of books, has this pace layering graph that he likes to put up of what moves fastest and slowest in society, and it goes from fashion, commerce, governance, culture, fashion, commerce, infrastructure, governance, culture, and nature. And this is how civilization moves the fastest on top, the slowest on the bottom, the more powerful on the bottom. And he tried creating that. He developed that from his pace layering of the life of buildings, created that as a pace layering for civilization, tried to develop something for cities until he realized that civilization is mainly about cities. Who was it who said, I think it was Jeffrey West who said, cities are the crucible of civilization. And so how we run our cities basically decides what's going to happen in the future for all of society, all of the planet. We are now 50% urban and increasingly becoming 75% urban. Rachel is the Chief Digital Officer for the City of New York, and I think one of the first in the country to have a Chief Digital Officer, which is very different from a CIO. There are cities with CIOs or CTOs. They basically are concerned with the servers that the city has to maintain, or concerned about the desktops that all of the employees use. Chief Digital Officer focuses on the way the city government engages New Yorkers through technology. So it's really the interface. And it's really about developing this new avenue of citizenship. She's tasked with putting together the holistic plan for New York City. She's put it together of tapping New York City's digital potential through enhanced access, open government, engagement, and industry. And prior to this role, she was founder and CEO of Ground Report, a citizen journalism platform. And it empowers reporters to publish original, intelligent reporting to an international audience. I think that's another field we're clearly seeing being changed by the technologies. She was also an adjunct professor here at the Columbia Business School and worked previously as a digital strategy consultant and business developer in the software industry. She attended New York public schools and is graduated magna cum laude from NYU. Rachel?
Thank you, everyone. I'm very, very happy to be here. And, oh, thanks, I just dropped something. Very happy to be here. So having less of a focus on transportation, what I'd like to do is share our framework for how we're approaching innovation on a citywide scale. And I think maybe that could be relevant to your work and to a focus specifically on transportation, but I will, of course, also highlight some of the things we are doing on a citywide basis. So I started with the city about 9 months ago, and the first task, as noted, was the roadmap for the digital city. We introduced it, the mayor introduced it in May, and if you'd like to check it out, it's at nyc.gov/digital. And it was really answering this question, which is, what is our goal as a city in the digital realm? And a quote that I like to use, and it's just a coincidence that it's Department of Transportation, is this concept that city streets are the original social network. So if we're trying to look at how we evolve our digital spaces, I think we can look at how we've been able to make our physical spaces successful, how we're able to engage the public and serve individuals through that level of interaction. So to answer that question, we embarked on this digital roadmap, and the research that went into it created a three-part report. The first part was State of the Digital City, where are we today? And it turned out, despite what you may think, we're actually in a really great position in the city of New York. We're engaging over 4 million individuals, unique individuals per month, through our digital interfaces. nyc.gov is the biggest one with about 2.6 million visitors, and then we have an increasing amount through social media and email newsletters, 1.5 million. And the difference there is that that's also completely transforming the relationship that agencies have with their constituents through just deeper interfaces. By other indices, we are now number 2 in the country in terms of venture capital funding, especially and primarily to startups. So our digital industry is really growing. And we have a very vibrant and growing open data initiative that I'll talk a little bit more about later. So the first part said, we're in a pretty good position. We also saw numbers where we saw the demographics that are accessing our website are pretty even, and across different groups of society. But in the second part, that's what I thought was really interesting, because that's what's pointing us in the direction of going forward. And part two is digital input. So we know where we are. What is everyone saying where we need to be? And there are some sobering realizations there. And we had over 4,000 points of engagement, whether it was a comment, a suggestion, a survey entry, a like on something that we were posting on whether it was a Facebook survey or Quora, et cetera. And what we found out was there was a diverse number of things that we needed to do. Relevant to this audience, I would say that one of the #1 requests we had from the public, the general public, was for internet access, and most specifically internet access and cell coverage in subways. And another piece is that in terms of developers, real-time APIs for the subway system was the #1 type of data that they were interested in. So again and again, whenever we're asking, what do you want? What can the city provide you that's from within our existing infrastructure? We're hearing that transportation is really the fiber that's connecting everyone. So we took in all of this feedback. There was a lot of other additional points, as you can imagine, and we created a plan that's centered on 4 parts. And I think this framework could potentially be applied to other models of frameworks for innovation. So the first step is access to technology, whether it's digital divide or making sure that people have the tools and the training that they need to use technology, because if they don't have access to it, it doesn't really matter how great it is. Open government, engagement, and industry. So what are our plans? First, with access. So in terms of the city, the #1 element that we heard in our research to the public was everyone is interested in public Wi-Fi. For a number of reasons, this is extremely challenging to implement. We are supporting public-private partnerships, as this is a more sustainable way of moving this forward, and also, we think, a more efficient use of taxpayer dollars. But there is also a number of different initiatives underway already. For example, it says 40 parks with free Wi-Fi. Now we're even closer to 50. This is infrastructure that's being developed at no cost to the city and thus to taxpayers by companies including AT&T and Time Warner, et cetera, that otherwise would be extremely costly. You are able to, in the AT&T parks, use as much Wi-Fi as you want. In the other ones, there is a cap at about 30 minutes. And we're just, these are the building blocks of getting the infrastructure in place, and then after that, it's a fairly low cost plan, and all of this was negotiated to make sure that the cost for all of this access was reasonable and accessible to the widest possible number of individuals. One of the things I'm most excited about is through the Federal Broadband Technologies Opportunity Program, BTOP. The city is going to be connecting in some, over 100,000 individuals, and primarily lower income individuals who don't have broadband at home. And within that program, there's one that's particularly cool, which is it's serving 18,000 sixth graders. And these sixth graders are in schools where 75% or more of the populations are receiving lunch assistance. And not only do they receive broadband at home, their entire family gets training, and they receive the actual hardware and computers so that they're able to take advantage of it. And it's a holistic program, and that's really why we like it. Beyond that, there's Wi-Fi in every library branch across the 3 systems in the city of New York. This is huge. It's the primary way that individuals who don't have broadband at home are getting online. And they're not even just using it to find jobs, which is crucial to economic development. That is important. 80% of employers only put jobs online. But they're just using it to participate in society. They're going on Facebook and they're socializing. There's a lot of youths, a lot of teens who are using it, and that's important. That's important for being able to be part of society. And there are pilot subway programs in the works. I have all the Twitter accounts in case anyone's tweeting, to bring more Wi-Fi to underground stations. I believe they're starting with about 6 or 7. So that's the foundation. We need to do more, but we're in a good spot with those programs and hope to expand on them. In terms of open government, this means that we need to internally have both, from a technology standpoint, the data needs to be in a way that we can share it within our agency, from agency to agency, the City of New York, employs almost 300,000 people. We need to make sure that that's in a format where we can all work with it. And then finally, and I think crucially, we need to make sure that that data can be revealed to the public and provided to developers and researchers who want to help to improve the lives of New Yorkers in different ways. And we need a culture of open government. And why this is also very exciting is because we can start to think of our city as a platform. So this is something that Tim O'Reilly has said a lot. You look at commercial platforms, whether it's Facebook or Twitter, that released these very powerful APIs, wealth of resources of data, and what they create is an entire ecosystem built on top of that data. And as a city, we have a strong opportunity to do the same thing. We have such rich data, we have so many valuable resources that if we can enable the public, we can help to serve individuals. And we can also just go beyond creating a specific app that does X, Y, and Z. We can be integrated into the fabric of the way you're already living your life online and the apps you're already using and the platforms you're already a part of. So the thing we like about the city as a platform and really enabling our data is that it's user-centric, so it puts the user right at the center. If you go to nyc.gov right now, we think that we need to make some changes to make that more user-centric. It's showing how we organize ourselves as a government instead of showing how you as an individual thinks about an issue. You don't think which department can fix this particular type of pothole. You think about things in terms of your quality of life. You think about, how do I get my kid into kindergarten? So APIs and data and open government enables a more user-centric model because we're decentralizing that process. We're democratizing both the flow of information but also services and transactions. And that's where things get really interesting. As an example of this, I would just like to show a recent, so this is the data set. We've now upgraded our data platform, but this was earlier from the NYC data mine. If you want to see the city's data sets, you can go to nyc.gov/data, and you can find our new API-enabled data. This was before it was API-enabled, but just to show an example of the great thing about this is also, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily want to call this serendipity, but the fact that there are surprising ways to use data that you would never consider. So a couple of years ago, you would say, what's the point of having geographic files for hurricane evacuation zones in New York City? And this is the before picture. Well, it turned out that when we did have the Hurricane Irene situation, several weeks back, I guess now a couple of months back, the city's website, nyc.gov, was completely overwhelmed. And it went down for 4 hours, right after the mayor had issued an order for everyone in evacuation zone A to evacuate. So this created some concerns. Thankfully, the city had put out its data resources. I heard Open Plans mentioned before. Some of the folks from that operation were also involved in this, and we were in constant contact with Google, with folks like WNYC, New York Times, making sure that as we updated our data, they had it. So this was a really amazing thing that happened. That WNYC used those data sets. They built a beautifully functioning interactive hurricane evacuation zone map where you could look up where you were. We were regularly feeding them changes to things like evacuation shelters, and they ended up serving something like 5 times the number of people we served on our website. And it was also great for them. They more than doubled their previous traffic record, so there was a media advantage for them as well. And we were able to serve more New Yorkers, and we were able to serve more people, and that's just always the goal. Another example of how we benefit as a city when we're opening ourselves up to innovation from the public is this summer we had our first hackathon. It was the reInvent NYC Gov hackathon. So, as you can tell, I'm very focused, and we're all, as a city, very focused on evolving the city's website and looking at how can we completely rethink the user interface of the city. It was 2 days. If you're familiar with a hackathon, probably the people in here are. It's a positive thing. It's not a negative thing. It's a collaborative community development effort where you get together and you focus on a problem for a focused period of time. Technology problem, and you build something and you collaborate, and instead of it taking months and months, you're able to put something together quickly and have a working prototype to really realize your thoughts. So as an example, this is the before. This is the current website for the city of New York. The last time it was updated was it was about 10 years ago in terms of the look and feel. And we thought when we embark on this process, we need to have a completely clean slate. And that's why we enlisted all of these these wonderful people. So these are a few of our winners of the hackathon, and this is one of the designs they built. So this was the winner for the user interface design, and you see there's geolocation on the bottom right that can be pulling in relevant city resources to you. They have the most commonly requested topics on the left, and then a super search-centric, user-centric interface there. There's also, just below that, a dynamically updating feed that can be linked to our existing Notify NYC emergency alert system. Another great thing that completely surprised me, I was expecting a lot of search-centric interfaces, was the number of question and answer platform, if you will, like Quora or Stack Overflow type of models. And this was one of those. So we're asking it in a way that humanizes government. You feel like you're talking to a person. And it also allowed for dynamic language selection, and because the mayor mentioned it, you sort of, casually when he met with the winners of the hackathon, he said, I'd really love to be able to just ask this into my phone because I always mistype things, I'm on the go. And in the true nature of developers, within 2 hours, they had put up Google Voice enabled search on this application. These are all live. If you go on nyc.gov/digital, you can find them. Another question and answer platform that was great and went a step further. In this model, after you type your question, you not only find out if others in your community had answered them, you could also have your question answered by the mayor, for example. So you ask your question, whether it's how do I get my kid to kindergarten, or how do I fix a pothole? You hear 300 other New Yorkers ask this question. Here's the top rated one. So that's engagement. And I should also mention that in terms of relevant to data and especially transportation, during the reInvent NYC Gov hackathon, we also saw Uber, the sort of taxi connection application. They played around with some taxi and limousine data, and they built a real-time travel predictor that was far more accurate than Google by using something like 500 million data points from the TLC. And we're working with them to see if we can reveal that data as well. So in terms of engagement, that's our third part of our plan. How are we currently serving individuals, and how can we do an even better job? And the key thing here is that up until now, a lot of press and communications from the city, it's often broadcast. We're telling our story. And the difference here is we get a feedback loop that was never before possible. And you also see agencies developing these direct relationships with the public. We have over 200 channels of social media accounts that engage with the public, whether it's email, Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, a range of different options. So while they're announcing, they're getting feedback, they're talking about ongoing programs, it also shows the utility in things like emergency services. So during Irene, we had a situation, again, where there was between press conferences, and the press conferences were streamed live to people's mobile devices, et cetera. People were indoors. There's a huge sense of urgency, and information was critical. So what we established was an emergency protocol for social media to make sure that everything was completely consistent, because the last thing you can have in those situations is conflicting accounts. And the social media teams were phenomenal. And what we saw was the at NYC Mayor's Office became, especially when the site was briefly down, really the go-to resource, and we had thousands upon thousands of interactions happening. We also had enormous promotion through YouTube, and in both of these cases, whether it was with Twitter or YouTube, we were working with these partners to help, because they saw the urgency of the situation. So Twitter promoted tweets for NYC Mayor's Office so that anyone in New York City was seeing those tweets when they logged in if they had location enabled, and YouTube was promoting the videos on their Facebook page and in other places. And the response, was fantastic. Whatever people thought of the actual, activity, of the actual steps taken in preparation, they universally appreciated the social media updates, because they felt they were connected, they felt they knew what was going on, they felt at every moment they were responding. We were also doing an enormous amount of situational monitoring to see what are people talking about. Is there something we didn't think of? Is there a theme cropping up that we need to address, and funneling that out to the appropriate people at different agencies? And the numbers don't lie. We had, before Hurricane Irene, there were 24,000 followers at NYC Mayor's Office. Afterwards, there's 54,000. There were also 60,000 views on YouTube. so it became incredibly crucial. I know this has already been brought up today, but just to reiterate, in terms of other modes of social media. So we looked at the emergency use of social media, and then across the agencies for public information and just for demystifying what's going on in the city. I think a phenomenal example is the Department of Transportation. I bring them up all the time. Robin Lester-Kenton is here and has done a phenomenal job in engaging the public and taking an issue and bringing it, sort of adding transparency and making it more engaging and interesting. So I think you've heard about it earlier from the commissioner, but essentially the Tumblr was one of the city's first Tumblrs to launch, and shows stats and numbers and pictures on how the city is dealing with its potholes and other issues, and in a way that's much more accessible. The NYC Free Condoms program has been enormously popular, and not surprisingly, they are our most popular mobile app. So you can find wherever you are in the city free condoms. Yeah, I mean, this is a great public health campaign, and they've done it in a way where it's often about the tone. So the most successful city presences on social media is places where it's not the city just telling you what to do. It's places where we create a comfortable environment for you to talk about issues, and then we get out of the way. And we can provide supporting resources. We play a supporting role. And the Department of Health has just been phenomenal in keeping this conversation going in a way that's respectful and non-threatening and really interesting. Another agency with enormous potential to take this even further is 311. They've already begun to do this, so there's text. You can now text in your service request to 311, and they've also begun to respond to questions on Twitter. And the difference here is that 311 deals with something like 19 million calls a year, but that's all on a one-to-one basis. And we're not benefiting from the public value. We're not benefiting from the aggregate value of having that happen in a public space or public square. So here, we're having the same engagements that would be happening on the phone, but we're creating a public record of those. And there's a knowledge base that's developed so that maybe the next time you're searching for something, you might even find a tweet that helps you to solve this issue. And then the city itself, in addition to some of the apps that we've already mentioned, now has nine mobile apps that it's created. I believe it's more mobile apps than any other American city has developed on a range of different platforms. So again, this is about going to where people live online and supporting that. Finally, industry. So it's important to have the access to the technology. It's important to have the structure of openness internally so you can share that data and that you have a culture of cooperation within government. It's important to engage with the public and always complete that feedback loop. And it's also important to support a vibrant digital industry, because sometimes government is not the best ones to be doing these innovations, and whether it's a company like Waze or Open Plans, developing their own solutions is what we're going to benefit from in the long term. So those innovations will be applied to serve New Yorkers. So to start, we want to compete with Silicon Valley, so we're supporting all of our local startups. The mayor, this just over the past 9 months has been to Twitter, Yelp's opening, Etsy, Tumblr, Foursquare, saying there are phenomenal, and many of them location-based startups in New York City. The city has also launched the NYC Big Apps competition. So there's a couple, if you look here, of transportation apps such as Rotify, which is crowdsourcing traffic data, and Wheels. You probably are familiar with some of these. And encourage all of you to apply, and to the NYC Big Apps competition 3.0 is now in effect. And we're accepting applications, and that rewards something like $50,000 to individuals who build apps using city data. We also work directly with these partners who are providing these tools to the city. We held the city's first ever internal social media conference this year. Most people had never been to a social media conference. Many of them had only sort of been yelled at by legal in the past for engaging on social media. And now we're saying, you are our digital ambassadors. You are the next phase of how we're engaging with the public, and you're revolutionizing that. And you're our pioneers in leading the way. And finally, the City of New York has put out an RFP and recently received, we just finished getting all of the different applications for a new applied or expanded applied sciences campus in New York City. And this is meant to sort of build on the successes of our existing engineering campuses and take it even further. And how can we support and continue to support even more innovation in this city by nurturing that academic environment? So that's all for now. I want to thank everyone, and I also hope that you will engage with us both online. You can ask a question to the mayor using the Ask Mike hashtag, and of course there's the email. If you want to just address us and maybe not hire for a job, it's digital@media.nyc.gov. So thank you very much.
Fantastic panel. Can I ask all of them to join us on the table? And then we will open it up to some questions. I think the method we're doing, Georgia, is you have little, are you going to still?
We've got cards, there are mics that we're
Oh, so we'll do the mic.
Yeah.
You're going to do both. So if you're a little shy, put it on a card and hand it to people walking down. If not, try to grab the mic. I'll ask them with a few starter questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. I know you're all eager.
Yeah.
Might be nice to have some. We have these mics. There's a question for Twitter. And the hashtag is BitCity. So if you have, is there a Wi-Fi signal within there? There is. It's open. Okay. Okay. Let me start off with a very general question to all of you. With possible exception of Waze, which was more, its engagement with the establishment was to co-opt them so that they started using you because it was more efficient than having the helicopters go around. What were the biggest challenges, both from the establishment, I'll use that as a general sense, the established services and the established hierarchies of getting these kinds of services through? Someone from the establishment must be running the... This is very intimate. There we go. Is that better? Yeah. Okay, and are the mics working? You can hear me. Okay. So what were those challenges of basically you're changing the way these agencies, the cities, or the media operates? And so what were some of the biggest challenges that you guys face? We'll start with Rachel.
So in terms of engaging in private partnerships especially?
Or just being a little bit more open to the rest of the city. I mean, I dealt with cities, and one of the first people who come up that will stop you are the lawyers who will say, you know, there are, you know.
So, I mean, I would say that that's pretty accurate, and not because they're trying to get in the way, because they're doing their job.
Yes.
So I worked in the private sector before this, and it's a completely different world because you've got lives at stake, and it's you know, it's not your money, it's taxpayer dollars. So
right.
there are ways that we need to make sure that there are rules followed in the way that that services are purchased or products are developed. And then there are also a lot of different things that I think make engagement on public with the public sector on social media platforms even more interesting, because, for instance, a private company, if they have a Facebook page, they can delete any comments they might not want there. If there's something negative, they can say, you know, they can sort of whitewash things. And as a government entity, that's an example of the type of thing that we can't and won't do. And we enable, you know, a free public square whenever we're doing things like that. But because of that, we have to be really deliberate and really strategic about every new platform we use. So we have to be careful about protecting personal privacy, respecting freedom of speech at every element, and it's also a completely new area of law. So we're in constant contact with the city's legal team, because every time we are using another third-party platform, we're looking at their terms of service, we're making sure that we can abide by those, and,
right.
and if we can't, then it's not a good fit.
Right, if Facebook owns the whole comment stream, then is that a matter of public record then, and can you everything's always open to interpretation. Okay.
But what we like to, you know, err on the side of more freedom of speech, and it's a very tolerant, you know, open administration, and so that's why we go that way.
Yeah, I mean, so at the MTA, you know, we had the blessing of some really good leadership in terms of opening up our data, for example. I mean, and also not just leadership, but also the fact that this was something that had happened in a whole lot of other cities in America first. I think probably first in Portland, so Bibiana's out there somewhere. And
raise your hand.
yeah, and so I mean that always helps. I think in my case it's the what you're talking about is a little more along the lines of, you know, how are we sort of buying this project that was a little bit different, and I think it just sort of an example might do justice. So like I said, typically the way in the public sector you kind of buy some technology, or often even just buy a big construction project, is you have one contractor and they're essentially responsible for everything. In this project, in order to sort of follow some of the strategies we wanted, meet some of the objectives we had, we really had to break it up into, say, at least two pieces. And so the questions that the lawyer asked, and they were really the right questions, were, okay, so now you have a relationship with two separate contractors. In order for this project to work, they have to work together. And so what's going to happen when they start pointing fingers, right? And that's a critical question that anytime you're sort of writing a contract, putting people on the line, you have to understand sort of who's accountable for what. And sort of deciding and realizing for ourselves, well, we're responsible for making sure that they work together. And if they start pointing fingers, well, really, it's our job to make sure they don't point fingers, because when one of them sees a problem, we sort of have the capacity and the capability to figure out what the problem actually is, because we understand what's going on, and make sure that if the problem is theirs, you know, we tell them that. If it's the other guys, then we work with them to fix it. So, you know, as an example, I think we were fortunate to have support that would allow us to kind of have the capacity to do things a little bit differently.
But it puts you at more risk on one hand, and more responsibility
Yeah, I
at
mean,
the same time.
if bus time doesn't succeed, I deserve to lose my job. I mean, there's no question. So.
I'll shift the question a bit for both Diane and Candace. From both, you can tell us a little bit about the institutional challenges or dealing with institutions, but also the challenges of dealing with the users themselves and the acceptance. You know, how hard was it to start crowdsourcing for Waze, and how hard is it to get, you know, bus users to actually start thinking that I can get information through the phone on this thing?
Yeah, so the last question to this question is that, you know, we have been very slow in working very practically with cities. I mean, we speak at these conferences and we work on a platform that's encouraging the two-way dialogue, but as a startup, we have to focus on opportunities that are fairly short-term. And so, for example, working with the city of Los Angeles, we are, you know, in communication with maybe 10 different agencies, and it's a lot of discussion, but it's hard to say when anything will actually formalize. And so the user is the number1 priority for us. Everything that we do revolves around that. And it's been, there are always challenges when dealing with something that's crowdsourced. But in terms of getting everything started, for example, in Israel, it was very easy because there's only one map entity in Israel. And it's like a lot of the map systems we have here, the information is out of date. So our founding CTO basically hacked that map to try to let a large community of people put in fresher information, and he got a cease and desist, the whole bit. So he and that user group basically said, okay, we'll just create it ourselves. So it really started from there being a need. And the same thing has evolved as we've evolved into traffic. There's a real need there. And people are contributing their time, people are creating applications, people are doing so many things. They're localizing the application into their own languages. And they're doing that because they want to be able to have this freely available resource everywhere in the world. But it's hard. I mean, every time they want a feature, we hear about it on the forums. Every time there's a bug, they find it. It's very, very tricky to keep everybody happy.
I completely agree with many of the points you just made. And in terms of looking at the user perspective, one of the key things is, do they derive a benefit from using this? And particularly for people who might not be as inclined to use new technologies, what are they going to get? So, you know, when you're standing on a February morning out at a cold bus stop, and you don't know when the bus is coming, but you see on a sign posted along your route, oh, I could send a text message to this number and get some information. You know, people will see a real benefit, and they've started to use it, and we see gradual increases in utilization over time.
Let me just tell a little story about that. That's kind of funny. early on when we were developing the B63 pilot, I was, as part of sort of understanding how the bus operation works, was just riding the B63 back and forth and talking to one of the bus operators, and she was asking questions about how's this thing going to work, and are you going to put signs at the bus stops? No, it'll be available on the internet. And she's like, well, what about if someone goes in their house and looks, and then they go out to the street and then they don't know what's happening, right? And then there's this guy sitting, in the seats in the front that are reserved for the elderly, and he's sitting there. He was going somewhere, and I didn't contemplate what he was thinking about. And when she asked this question, she said, well, how are people going to get the information on the street? He goes, well, they'll get it on their cell phones. So,
Then he whips out his smartphone.
Not quite, but if he's thinking that, I think it's sort of a safe assumption.
That's fantastic. I'm going to turn now to the questions from Twitter and from the audience. I'll ask one first. This invariably comes up whenever we're talking about open data and open data access. It's a question of privacy. And I'll frame this with the concept of privacy is probably less than 100 years old. That the concept of what is public and is private is actually less than 100 years old. In fact, if you look at military structures, the private is the least important person in the hierarchy. So being public was more important than being private, but that somehow shifted. But I'll ask that question too from Untapped Alley. Untapped Alley wants to play the devil's advocate. How is this data usage and acquisition not intrusive? And I'm conscious that there was a study in Germany that showed that your geographic data can be as unique as your DNA. I'll ask that of the end, since they're basically user data. And I'll ask it of Rachel too, because when you submit your question, there is necessarily identifiable data about who's asking that question, and you can come up with citizen makeups.
Yeah, and we're breaking new ground as an industry. Way beyond Waze. These are very, very new questions, and we need to figure out not just how to protect people's information, but who owns it. And I think that's kind of a fundamental question. I like to think that we're heading into a world where those unique traces that I was talking about, that they're owned by us, and we get to dictate who and how we share them. With whom and how we share them. But related to our application specifically, we don't hold any personally identifiable information. Okay. We kind of employ some industry standards related to scrubbing start and end, which is very imperfect. What you're seeing on the screen is there's actually a time and a location blur to some extent, so you can't actually stalk someone in real time, for example. And
Scratch that from the list.
Yeah, that's not something you can do on your own. There's another app for that. And the other thing is that you can give as much or as little information as you want. So we actually started not allowing people to share information like username and this kind of thing. And then it was our users who really requested it. So now you can see the little F icon when your Facebook friends are wazing around as well, and they can share more information. But it's really a choice that's made by each individual user.
By the wazers.
By the wazers.
Okay.
That's right.
I think it's a really interesting question. So first, personal safety and security is paramount, and we're really always going to, again, err on the side, of caution as it relates to that. And we, in terms of any of our open data, there is absolutely nothing that's personally identifiable. And from a digital perspective, what we do is our goal is really just to be relevant to people's lives. So first of all, some of these concepts are shifting. So just as the concept of privacy you said was emerging, some of those cultural paradigms are shifting anyway, and we just want to reflect that. And so we really respond to the user. So anything that is possibly personal, if someone's tweeting at 311, we'll respond to that. So it's voluntary. So our goal is really just to respond to what individuals are doing, what our constituents are doing, and how they're living online. And we're probably not going to be pushing the forefront in that way, and because it's so important for us to be especially supporting people's security and safety. But we're just gonna make sure that we're focused on being relevant to the way people are living their lives online. And if they are requesting certain levels of personalization, if they're requesting a more human or personal experience of NYC.gov, or they want that to happen, I think we should be able to create the forums for them to do so if they choose.
So they volunteer the information.
Yes, but
Or at
I
least
mean,
they
to be
consciously-
clear, there is no, there's no user information that's at all part of any of our data initiatives. If there, in terms of performance data, there's some completely anonymized sort of in the aggregate numbers, but there's nothing that's in that category yet. But, I'm saying anything that we do is really just going to reflect typical user behavior.
I'll open it up to the audience. I'll take this lady over here with the mic. Come up to.
Hey.
Could you tell us name, affiliation, and tell us whether it's a question or a comment?
Yes, my name is Stacy. I'm with the American Planning Association, and I have 2 short questions for Ms. Sterne. My first is, what lessons would you say that New York City has for small towns or rural communities who aren't there yet, or who are maybe thinking about taking the first step to digitizing some of their citizen interfaces? And my second question is, how would you characterize your department's relationship with the Department of Aging or the other, that organization within New York City government?
Sure. So the first question, and I have less experience working with smaller municipalities, but it would probably be the same, and this ties in with the second question, the same way that we approach when we're working with smaller agencies. So within NYC Digital, which is our office, we work on citywide strategy and citywide digital policy and the tools and the training that all of the 100+ individuals who are maintaining these channels use. But we also meet on a regular basis for one-on-one consultations, especially with the smaller agencies. So we hear daily from 1 or 2 agencies, and maybe it's even a commission that's really a 2-man show where they're wearing multiple hats and trying to do a lot. And what we start with is, don't try to boil the ocean, and usually it's back up and say, well, what do you want to achieve? And this is the framework that we use. So it's not, don't launch the Tumblr and the Facebook and the Twitter account just for the sake of having them. Say, how are you going to measure the success of what you're trying to accomplish? And then we work backwards and we say, what are the people in your constituency, what are they like? And what tools are they already using? And that's also how we determine public-private partnerships in the city at large. Usually the first thing I ask is, how many New York City users do you have, and what at all can you tell us about, how diverse is that group? So I would say for a smaller city, first define how you're going to measure success. What are those specific metrics? Define who your audience or your constituency is, and then work backwards. Where do they already live online, and then use those tools. And I think it's also important to say, what do you have the capacity to maintain? Because if you launch these things and they fall apart, it can have an even more negative outcome. And I would also add that I've talked with a lot of other major cities about this issue, because cities like New York, Chicago, San Francisco, LA, we have great convening power. We can hold a hackathon and we can have 100 people show up and build incredible applications. And we had people flying in from Kansas and Canada and all over the place. But for the smaller cities, they don't have the resources to do that. They might not be able to attract the developers. So what we're looking at is, how can we produce more of the innovations that occur within our events and our initiatives. Let's make them open source. Let's make them freely available to other cities, which will benefit us in the long term anyway, because then we can all have interoperable frameworks and things like that. And then in terms of our relationship with things like Department for the Aging, maybe you're suggesting that department because you perhaps think that they're less active technology, et cetera. But as Mike was saying, whenever I talk to the libraries, the #1 class that sells out is Facebook for seniors. So they're absolutely interested in this technology, and it's more about seeing, what are the right platforms, how are people using technology. So it's a mix of, we hold these training events, we had the Engage NYC workshop, we're producing how-to guides, we have presentations online. So we both have scalable solutions and then one-on-one consultations.
Your grandma is on Facebook. I'm sure she is. I'll take someone from this side, and okay, right at the very back there, and we'll do a little Stack Overflow after you ask your question and it's responded. Tell me which section I should ask from, and tell me whether male or female. Okay, that's going to be the protocol. So tell me first your name, your affiliation, ask your question. We'll have it answered. Keep the mic, and then tell me which section, middle, or as far as I'm concerned, right, left, or middle. Right in the back there. And then tell me whether male or female.
Okay, so $2 from anyone who wants to ask the next question. Let me put that up.
No pricing here, please.
Sorry. All right, so this is a question for Deanne, for Waze, and I'll tell you where I'm from, and there is a certain bias to this question. I work for the MTA. I'm a colleague of Mike's, and I work in sustainability. But my question is the following. If Waze essentially makes driving easier between Palo Alto and San Francisco, and effectively tells me what the Dumbarton Bridge is doing at that moment, it's not such a great thing in the biggest global picture. In fact, if the Dumbarton Bridge is absolutely jam-packed and logged, if you cannot cross it every day, that would be a good thing for maybe increasing rail capacity on Caltrain between Palo Alto and San Francisco, or having more transit, bike, ped, those kinds of things. And if driving becomes easier, if essentially you're able to throw more capacity into the system, that's not, I don't think, such a great thing from certain very important perspectives. Now, do I assign the mic right away?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Wait. Can I answer?
Let Diane answer, and I'll add to that question. In other words, can you ever imagine, apart from telling you a route, can Waze tell you, go take the bus, it's faster?
So first of all, we're not trying to solve transportation. We're trying to fix what's broken about driving. And as we look at the broader transportation picture, one of the things we realize is, other than buses, what tends to happen is some cities get very excited about things like light rail, and it takes a long time to put it together, and it can be much more efficient, but you're talking about an inner core, right? So we're always going to have people who don't have necessarily access to public transportation. We're always going to have people who choose to use their cars. And so our small role in that whole picture is to try to make that more efficient. And to give you an example, I mean, I guess these numbers everyone in this audience knows, but the recent numbers are something like 25 million tons of CO2 just from, per year in the US, just from sitting in traffic jams. So if we can work on congestion avoidance through this way that's crowdsourced, it doesn't cost cities any money, I think it's something very interesting. And as we learn about driver behavior, cities are employing things, for example, like congestion pricing. We can do things like congestion incentives. If we know on average how many cars it takes to make this kind of traffic jam on a bridge or on a major highway, we can incentivize, say, the 25 or 30 or 50 cars necessary to get off the road and keep things flowing. That's just the one part we provide. Over time, I hope to be able to incorporate more real-time transit information, but right now, we're 55 people, and we really have to focus on our one problem of fixing the driving parts. And there are plenty of other people working on subways and on buses, but it's not really our area of expertise. I hope we'll make a big impact this way, just from making driving a bit better and more efficient.
That could be interesting to have bid-based congestion pricing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I like to say congestion incentives, but
congestion incentives, which is ad-based. So tell me what section.
Okay, maybe the farthest from myself, and I think it was girl, boy, so girl again.
Okay, female from this side. Anyone raising their hand? Over there.
Hi, I'm Nicole Volofka. I'm here from Colombia. And I'm wondering, what about this, for the Waze application, I'm sort of intrigued as to how drivers can engage in this safely, given like texting while driving is now outlawed. So if it's moving smoothly, what is it that you do? I mean, if you're sitting in traffic, maybe you have time to tweet, but that's also dangerous. So how do you address these concerns?
So because we know your speed, we don't allow texting while driving. If you try, we'll block it, unless you can go into passenger mode, though. So most of everything is passive. We voice guide you to your destination. Turn right on Broadway, turn left, whatever. We're just collecting the GPS traces passively. When you are stopped, then you can report on hazards, on police, on this kind of thing. But we don't allow you to type while you're driving.
Stopped in traffic? I mean, because then you're still sort of engaging.
At an accident, for example, we have a lot of pictures coming in of an accident. I actually took a picture yesterday and I was actually stopped, but in San Francisco there was a 4-car pileup in front of me. So I was able to take the picture, and then everybody else behind me knew, and I was literally stopped.
Okay. One question, and then I'll read from here. Did you tell us which section in male or female? Middle? Just tell me the section, and I'll pick. Middle, male or female? Male. This gentleman over here, who was raising his hand even before the presentations were finished.
A question for Mike and Candace. Actually, sort of two-part question.
Yeah.
Have you
who you are and
Charles Komanoff. Have you estimated the amortized kind of per ride cost of the bus time information if it were applied system-wide? Like, is it a penny a ride, a tenth of a penny? And second, have you estimated, I've actually done a back-of-the-envelope calculation of how much would bus ridership citywide increase if we had bus time everywhere? I'm kind of rough estimating it might be as much as 8%. Have you done your own estimates and then translated that into revenue for the MTA, reduced car use, reduced carbon dioxide, Diane, et cetera, because it seems like this is a very powerful tool that you're creating.
Yeah, no, sorry.
No, I think in terms of with the ridership, that's one of the things that we're going to be looking at further more in the future is what the actual impact on ridership are and to see how things change and how it could benefit the city as it rolls out more.
Yeah, that amortized number shouldn't be too difficult to figure out. In terms of costs, there's a challenge in the sense that when you're sharing technology between multiple sort of different projects serving different functions, you have to decide, well, which project is responsible for which amount of cost. But once you make that decision, it's a fairly straightforward calculation, I guess. In terms of the ridership increase, I'm sure we could estimate. I mean, personally, I've never seen any kind of really rigorous academic literature describing, in Chicago or Boston or Portland or places that have this, London now, how that has affected bus ridership in a way that's kind of econometrically really sort of rigorous. So I'd love to see it if it's there.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to read off. This is more of a comment. I'll read it. Since this conference is in the School of Architecture and Planning, if I understand it, should an architect planner be part of the conference in order to present the importance of planning of urban spaces? I'm a planner. With data info given here in Portland, Oregon, 30 years ago, eliminated parking area in the center with a plaza, new transportation, way of living, sense of place. Also Boston, etc. So it's more of a comment that it's important to have the architects in here too and the planners. But there's many types of planning. I hope that satisfies you to at least have the moderator have some sort of planning degree. Okay, one more. We've been given about 5 more minutes, so maybe we can take 2 more questions. Will the gentleman name a section and...
He's had his hand up from the beginning.
He's had his hand up from the beginning. Let's pass it on to this gentleman then. I've been overruled by the panel.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Open API there.
Daniel Latore with Project for Public Spaces. This is a question for the MTA about the selection of the routes. I guess I'm interested in why Shaolin is going to be the next phase and not like another section of Brooklyn or Boogie Down. Yeah. But in terms of just justifying the technologies, like not having readable displays on the signs, but having maybe just texting options to get the information, how did you deal with the sort of usual, almost sort of worn out blocks to that where people say, oh, but no one uses cell phones or the penetration rates aren't as high? Do you use like an R&D kind of rationalization, or how did you explain to people that we need to start doing this now in order to be, have the capacity for that?
What was the first part of the question again?
Why Shaolin and not
why Staten Island? So, in terms of why Staten Island, I think there's probably 2 I mean, this wasn't my decision, right? So, I think there's probably 2 reasons. One would be that Staten Island has the least non-bus public transportation. So therefore, one could argue, I guess, that they need this most. Also, it's the smallest borough. So if you were going to sort of do this at the scale of one borough in a way that allows you to kind of minimize your risk while you're sort of learning as you go along. From a delivery perspective, I think that would be the reason. In terms of the question of cell phones and such, you know, I really don't think it's an either or, in fact. I mean, as Candace sort of described, lots of demographic research that we've done at the sort of city and the route level really, I mean, indicate that just the growth of cell phone and smartphones is just, by the time we finish this project, it'll be a completely different percentage, completely different number. But also aside from that, even if you wanted to do signs at some or all bus stops, and it's not that we're not looking at how to do it at, say, bus shelters, right, where you have a little more infrastructure than just a pole stuck in the sidewalk. Even if you wanted to do that, that does take longer, and it is more expensive. No matter what, you need to put the stuff on the bus, and you need to have a server that kind of gathers the information and would make it available to the thing powering the sign. And so structuring your technology as kind of an incremental sort of open standards and incremental growth. I mean, the same API that iPhone app developers will have to the bus time server, the thing powering the sign could have. So it's really just a question of what are you trying to do when a certain amount of money is available and a certain amount of time is at hand. One thing I'll say is that, so Samusa, right, is the company that, with a contract to the city, sort of builds, owns, and operates all of the bus shelters and also lots of newsstands in New York. In Times Square, you can go and see a Samusa newsstand with a fancy digital display that's pulling from the MTA's website the service status of all the subway lines. So it goes, you know, weather, news, advertisement, service status, and MTA subway lines. We had nothing to do with that. So, you know, I think there's a real possibility that Samusa in and of itself could decide there's a reason to put this in the shelters because it will keep people in the shelters looking at the advertisements instead of getting a bagel or some coffee. So, you know, you want to leave yourself open to those possibilities, and you want to do what you can do now quickly with X amount of money.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and I'll reserve the last question for myself. Dan, did you name us? Let's go to this section since we've done this twice. Then. That section then. Did you say female? Female from this section. No one's raising their hand. Any female raising their hand? Way in the back there, I think that's...
I'm Bibiana McHugh from TriMet in Portland, Oregon. Hi Dee. I have a question. I'm going to put you on the spot. Everyone here, all the panelists, are open about data and transparency and everything else. And Waze, you guys are collecting a lot of valuable information that could be valuable to a lot of other agencies. Have you thought about using not only open source data like OpenStreetMap instead of building your own proprietary street set? And have you thought about opening up an API to the data that you're collecting?
Yes, on the considering OpenStreetMaps, and we actually did a very extensive evaluation maybe 9 months ago. And in all the areas we looked at, because actually our full intent was to kind of try to conflate the data sets, but the data was not, we couldn't even bring in any of the information because we were already too far accelerated from what was there. Also, I do work with Steve Coast quite a bit, and navigating the OpenStreetMap community for us right now is one of those things that's not quick. It's not going to allow us to accelerate and continue building our service and rolling it out very, very quickly. I love OpenStreetMap, and we're trying to work through what is the right way to do this. It's a constant balance between what parts of our data can we open and what parts do we really need to keep for ourselves because it's some kind of a value. But definitely, we're going to be opening more and more. It's a bit of a struggle. Right now, we open to a few people on a test base to see what's going to happen with the information. Like we have an agreement with MIT Sensible Cities Lab, where they have our data. We're starting to work with some of the broadcasters that they're facilitating city work with ours. So in Los Angeles, it's actually ABC who's bringing together us and the city agencies to try to figure out how we can merge this data. But it takes a lot more time than you would think. It sounds like, oh, take this feed and mash it up. But it takes a lot more time than that. And so we've been so busy at this point just kind of pulling together a service and rolling it out around the world that I think in 2012 we'll get much more serious about what's open and with whom. And you were the first people we talked to.
Okay, and I'll reserve the last question for myself, and it's a question to the whole panel. And I'll start with Candace. Looking forward, if you imagine that geodata and transportation data or interaction with government is at best version 2.0, maybe we're in the age of internet directories in the late 90s before algorithms came around. Looking forward, what is exciting you? Whether it's an understanding of what all this data can bring us, or is there some newer technology that you're paying attention to or keeping at the corner of your attention span that you think would be would create more disruptions and change the way we're interacting with our transportation systems or with our cities? And I'll start with Candace.
I guess I would say I'm most interested in bringing all the sources together. So getting from point A to point B, regardless of what mode, if it's biking, walking, and we're starting to see these real-time feeds integrated together. But right now, it's your bus app, your subway app, your walking or biking app. And once they get all together, that's when I'm excited to look and see how people may change behavior when they have all the information they need to make the best choice for them at that right moment.
Yeah, I agree with that. Without discounting the role of a partner like Waze in doing some things that might be too difficult or expensive or just not make sense for the public sector to do, what gets me excited is the fact that we're basically at this point sort of have proven the idea of being able to do bus time for, I don't know, let's be generous and say like a quarter of what it was supposed to cost and in half the time. Wow. And in a way that the MTA that has much more flexibility going forward in terms of how the cost of that system is driven and who it works with. And so what makes me excited is the fact that I think if we start to think a little bit more about how we do technology projects in the public sector, it will allow us to do things that are the things that only we can do. Only the MTA is going to put some GPS device on a bus. But only at the sort of simplest, most basic level, do what we need to do and let everyone else take it from there. And if we really understand the kind of minimum that we have to do that is good for ourselves and good for everyone and affordable and fast, it opens up so many possibilities, such as what Candace described.
I'm excited about a better seamlessness between citizen, application, city. So for example, I have this one idea that a certain city may say, all right, any routing application that goes through our city needs to insert this API. And what that would essentially do is, for example, in the use case of an emergency response situation, it would throw up a virtual roadblock into every application and would absolutely not route anybody through it. Now you can imagine all of the, how difficult it would be to get to that state where everybody's sharing enough information to allow that to happen. But once we get past those conversations, I think the invisibility of the flow of data to make our lives better between the bridges that tweet and this emergency that's happening over here and how it gets into our pockets is very, very exciting.
I think that's great. And also, I mean, I would just say sort of in...
Want to do it?
Yeah, let's do it. I'd say, in the abstract, it's, shared apps. So across the city, again, what Mike was saying about looking at the way that we develop applications, let's share them across, there's 300,000 people working for the city of New York. Let's share the apps across all of our digital communicators and digital content producers, but let's also share them with other cities, both in the US and abroad. Shared data standards as this goes forward, that's it's so geeky, but it's just like the biggest thing, and it's going to change, and it's crucial, and if we don't do it now, it's just going to get worse, and we already are in a tough position, but enabling that interoperability and that seamlessness, and I mean, tied to all of that shared APIs, and then specific to that, closing the feedback loop. So social media is great and digital engagement is great, but it's really closing the feedback loop is when governance is happening. So the 311 write API and hooking in with things like the Open 311 API that Open Plans is involved with, and then really enabling services, the service delivery and the ability to accept service requests and engage with the public in a scalable way through that API is what is exciting to me.
Well, thank you very much. Join me in thanking the panel, and we've gone over time. They'll be around for questions. Thank you.
I'm so happy it exists. Who knew?
I just want to let everybody know we're taking a lunch break right now, but we will come back here at 1:15 for our sessions this afternoon. For those people in live stream, we'll also be coming back at 1:15. So see you soon. Where does this go? Does this go up here?